Louise,
Yes.
Ted had just texted me saying he's waiting for the Zoom. I don't know if he's in here.
You
I
should be
know
in
it
here.
says he's in here, but he just texted me saying, is he opening it soon?
Yeah.
So, Ted, can you hear us? Oh,
I'm coming in hot. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
But I signed in at like 6:45. I don't know why.
I see. We saw you in here already. There's
Yeah.
two of you now in here. Actually, it's interesting.
oh, Adriana.
Oh,
Adriana.
Adriana.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I
Oh,
love
you're
your name, Adriana.
All
I'm
right.
sorry, I didn't hear you guys. I was so what did you say?
I said I love your name. You're showing up as Ted
What's
Fields.
my name? Oh my gosh, Dad, why? I
Well, you're a more
I just
attractive
clicked on
version,
the
so
link.
I'll take it. I'll watch.
Dad,
You know how you can
Dad,
change it
let
if
me
you
change it.
want.
It was oh my gosh.
I think you can change it if you go in
I
your in
will, I
the
will.
name.
I didn't
You can
notice.
stand in for me anytime.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to all who are in our audience. This is the Anti-Displacement Task Force presentation. We're going to be going over our recommendations. Oh, Ellen, could you just mute? I think one of the, I'll actually do it. There you go. Okay. So I just wanted to go over the format of this evening. We're going to be going over a brief overview of the recommendations and our progress so far. But first, I just want to welcome everyone, and I want to recognize if anyone's in the audience from our committees. Looks like we do have some committee members in the audience. Thank you to all the committee members who are coming to tonight's meeting. And okay, so we're going to be going through the recommendations, and it's going to be a tight hour. I just want to mention that we're going to be holding questions until the end. And if you have questions, use the Q&A function in Zoom. Otherwise, just put them in the chat, and then we will collect those questions. And then at the end, we will answer them. We probably won't get to all the questions, but we will note all those questions and we will get them answered. And we're going to place those answers on our SomerVoice page. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a QR code and a link that you can use to access that page. It's going to be voice.somervillema.gov/ADTF. So I want to go jump right into this presentation and talk about the introduction to our strategies. So what we are doing with our project is we're trying to address the issue of displacement of people having to leave the city, most of the time not on their own will, but sometimes willingly because they can't necessarily afford to stay here otherwise, and the impact that it has on residents, small businesses, and creative communities. We believe that these populations together form the fabric of the identity of our neighborhood, and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that this fabric is intact and we can preserve it as much as possible. So we have three committees working on displacement issues: the Residential Displacement Committee, Small Enterprise Displacement Committee, and the Creative Displacement Committee. And they're focused on your particular segments of the population. And they correspond with staff who's already working to do a lot of the displacement work, anti-displacement work, for those populations. We're just bringing them together with community members to try to come up with strategies to further assist those populations. So the reviews of recommendations that you're going to see here are going to be what is going to be in our report, which is going to be forthcoming. I think it's going to be released tomorrow morning, but it is not going to be inclusive of everything that everyone is doing to affect the issue of displacement across these population segments. To just know that we're going to be going over what is in the scope of the report, but it does not necessarily mean that that's all that we're doing. We're doing a whole bunch of more stuff in the background, and you'll see some of that in the report as well. So with that being said, I'm just going to go over real quick what our agenda is. We're going to talk about the progress of the task force. We're going to jump into recommendations. We have Ted Fields, or actually Morena Zelaya and Ellen Schachter starting us off with the Residential Displacement Committee. Then moving on to Ted Fields and Kelly O'Loughlin with the Small Enterprise and Adriana Fernandez for the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee, and then Michael Rosenberg for the Creative Displacement Committee. And we're going to talk about the next steps of the project, and then we're going to take your questions from the audience. So I'm just going to keep us moving. So the project goals for this project were to build on current efforts to equitably reduce the displacement rate for our residents, small businesses, nonprofits, and creatives. And we're trying to focus on locally actionable strategies, stuff that we don't necessarily have to request for permission from the state to do, things that we can get done on our own if we can prioritize that as much as possible. I'm just going to go really quick here. This will be in a recording, so you can see this as well. But this is just going over the number of people involved. We have over 50 people that were involved in this project between the three committees. We had people from the community, practitioners, experts in the field, business owners, artists, all walks of life are part of this. And one of the things that we try to make important here were that they were involved in the decision-making process. They steered and we pushed to the greatest extent that we could. We also have participation from city councilors on this. For the Residential Displacement Committee, we had Councilor Benjamin Campbell and Councilor Pineda Neufeld, apologies, Councilor Judy Pineda Neufeld. For the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee, we had Councilor Kristen Strezzo, and for the Creative Displacement Committee, we had Councilor Willie Bernally Jr. So together, everyone kind of led the work of the committees to develop these recommendations after identifying the priorities. So that looks like from May 2023 up until now, when we're doing the initial rollout. So today or tomorrow, actually, we're going to be releasing the committee reports from these three committees. And then in the spring, we're going to be doing a community event where we're going to focus really on celebrating the community that was part of making this project happen. It's going to have food, drinks. We're going to be releasing the Displacement Stories film, which is a project of this, taken on by the Creative Displacement Committee, Stephen Flight at the Department of Racial and Social Justice Department. And we're also going to have a panel discussion with community members from the task force. Are going to be invited to have a discussion with the audience about their experience in this process. And then we're also going to be releasing an implementation matrix, like a chart that kind of would be good for reference, just to see what we're working on and how we're going to do it. And then also a summary document that's going to be a very graphically designed version of these more technical reports that are mainly geared for people to be able to see and understand how the recommendations were developed and what we're looking to do. So with that being said, I'm going to just toss it over real quick. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to go over the recommendation themes real quick. So the over 50 recommendations that you're seeing tonight are, for the purposes of this PowerPoint, being put into three buckets: sustain, adjust, and innovate. Basically, where we see that we're doing something good, we're going to keep doing that as sustain. Where we see that if we take what we're already doing and slightly improving it or transforming it, we can adjust that. And where we see that we have an opportunity to do something that we're not already doing, we're calling that the innovate category. So using these three categories is how we're going to kind of reference these themes. Some committees are going to go a little deeper and categorize them a little deeper, but this is generally the buckets that we're working with. Quick overview of the recommendations themselves. The Residential Displacement Committee has a kind of a more geared towards sustain and adjust, in recognition that the Office of Housing Stability and the Housing Division are already doing a lot to help our population of residents from being displaced. So you'll see more of like, let's continue doing that. Let's continue to build sustainable funding, and then less on the innovate, because there's so much we're already doing. With the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee, you'll see that there are less recommendations overall, but this really kind of hits to the point that the recommendations are reflective of the committee's desire to really work on actionable strategies that we can do right now. So they're really more focused on like, what can we do today? So you guys see less recommendations overall there. And then the Creative Displacement Committee kind of recognizes that as a whole, the creative community has not received the same level of prioritization in the other areas of residential and small business displacement have received. And so their recommendations are really more reflective of, there's not a lot out there for us. So we're going to see a lot more innovative and new recommendations for this segment of the population where we haven't seen that before. So that's just a brief overview of like what you'll see tonight as far as themes and trends. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it off to Morena Zelaya and Ellen Schechter for the Residential Displacement Committee recommendations. Take it away, Morena.
Thank you, Luis. Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Morena Zelaya, and I'm Housing Policy Coordinator and serve as the co-chair of the Residential Committee of the Anti-Displacement Task Force. I'll be introducing some of our committee's recommendations, and we'll hand it over to my colleague, Ellen Schechter, to introduce others. Our first recommendation is related to rent stabilization. The recommendation is that the city should continue to advocate at the state legislature for the passage of the rent stabilization home rule petition that was drafted by the committee and or the passage of statewide rent stabilization enabling legislation. So the residential committee spent its first 6 months working to obtain community input and then drafting a home rule petition for rent stabilization in Somerville. As with many other initiatives described throughout the report, the city of Somerville lacks the power to enact and enforce an ordinance to stabilize rents without explicit authorization from the state. Committee members reviewed reports and studies related to rent stabilization, reviewed state enabling legislation and Boston's home rule petition, along with laws in place in other jurisdictions with rent stabilization. The committee also hosted 3 public listening sessions throughout the summer of 2023 in order to hear community input. The home rule petition was drafted and was submitted to appropriate city leaders. It was passed unanimously by the city council and was finally filed at the State House. And the committee is recommending that the city should continue to advocate for its passage. So the next topic is with regards to flexible rental assistance. So the recommendation for that is that the city should ensure that the long-term viability of a well-funded flexible rental assistance / homelessness prevention program, which is now known as FLEX SAHTF, which stands for the Somerville Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and with the use of general funds, free cash, or other available funding sources on an annual basis. Funds are recommended to be at least $2 million annually. There's a critical need for flexible sources of rental assistance that could help fill the gaps where other programs were ineffective in serving some of Somerville's most vulnerable residents. $4.3 million of federal ARPA funds were allocated to the Office of Housing Stability for this need in a program called Flex ARPA. The Community Action Agency of Somerville and the Somerville Homeless Coalition were chosen as partner agencies to administer these funds, and between July of 2022 and July of 2024, 385 households were able to avoid eviction due to this program. The program was so successful that it received a new appropriation from city free cash, but despite a current balance of $3.5 million available for future funding, at current rates of expenditure, this fund would be depleted by mid-calendar year 2026. It is critical that funding levels be maintained for this program. The next topic is related to the municipal voucher program. So this recommendation is to ensure that the long-term viability and growth of the municipal voucher program with use of general funds, free cash, or other available funding sources on an annual basis. So the municipal voucher program currently serves almost 30 households, primarily made up of immigrant families with children in the Somerville public school systems who are otherwise barred from federal housing assistance. Being barred from federal housing assistance makes these families especially vulnerable, and long-term harm is done to students who are forced to move away from their community because of eviction or other housing instability. The committee used data available as of September 2024 to estimate the need for new annual funding to sustain the MVP. Additionally, the committee believes that the program should be expanded, and if MVP is expanded to offer vouchers to 5 additional households, the estimated cost would be approximately $250,000 extra per year. This would bring annual program funding needs to a total of $1,550,000. Existing funds, which is currently $3.6 million for the post-ARPA period beginning in December of 2025, are projected to be depleted by mid-year 2028, assuming no expansion of the number of voucher households assisted. And the committee calls on the city to ensure that the program remains viable and can grow to benefit more residents. Our next item deals with local council in evictions. And the recommendation for that is to retain and maintain at minimum existing levels of funding for legal services to remain able to offer referrals at current capacity, and to continue to support state access to counsel legislation and advocacy for increased funding. So a large number of eviction cases are filed every year in Massachusetts, and many of these cases end with tenants losing their homes, either because tenants were vacated their houses following a case being filed, or because they were evicted. In its 2024 report, the Mass Trial Court reported that in 2023, only 3.5% of tenants facing non-payment of rent eviction cases in housing court were represented, while 90% of landlords had counsel. This imbalance of power means that tenants often fail to agree to appear in court due to fear of appearing without representation. They sign one-sided agreements and are unable to raise legal defenses or file counterclaims because they don't know or understand their legal rights and options. The access to counsel movement in eviction cases is similar to the right to counsel in criminal cases, and the state's fiscal year 25 budget included a $2.5 million line item for a pilot program, and the city has its own more modest program funded primarily by ARPA funds. This committee is strongly recommending that the current annual funding of $287,500 for housing-related legal services be preserved once ARPA funding is exhausted, and for it to be adjusted as needed for increased labor and related costs. Our next recommendation is deals with nonprofit or tenant-owned housing. So the recommendation is to increase the opportunities for the sale of buildings to affordable housing developers. In July 2022, the City of Somerville reallocated over $8 million in funds originally budgeted for the Green Line Extension Fund to the Somerville Affordable Housing Trust Fund in order to develop an early action acquisition fund. The fund has already been successfully used to purchase properties in the city, which are then deed restricted to require the property's use as affordable housing. There may be interest among other property owners, particularly small property owners, in selling their properties to affordable housing developers. However, there may be instances where a property owner is unaware that this is an option. Committee members recommend that the city reach out to Somerville property owners and invite the owners to notify the city if they intend to sell their building and they want to explore nonprofit purchase. Additionally, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which provides a right of first refusal to tenants or designee nonprofits to purchase buildings at market price, is a critical component of any strategy to take buildings off the speculative market for use as affordable housing. The committee recommends that the Early Action Acquisition Fund continue to be funded, that property owners be made aware of opportunities to sell their property to nonprofit developers, and that the city continue to advocate for the passage of TOPA. Finally, the next recommendation is with regards to the condo ordinance. So the recommendation is to update the required relocation payments in the condominium conversion ordinance to more accurately reflect the actual cost of relocating in Somerville. So Somerville's condominium conversion ordinance is intended to protect tenants facing displacement as a result of rental units being taken off the market because they are going to be sold as condos. One of the ways the ordinance protects tenants is by ensuring that tenants are provided the financial resources necessary for successful relocation. Increases in rental housing costs have far outpaced the overall rate of inflation. And according to data gathered through Zillow, Zumper, Craigslist, and PadMapper, the median rent for a 2 or 3 bedroom unit in Somerville was approximately $3,500. Members calculated, the committee calculated an additional relocation amount of, or an adjusted relocation amount of $14,000 for units with tenants who do not qualify for enhanced protections, and $18,000 for units with tenants that qualify for enhanced protections, meaning units with households who are low to moderate income, elderly, or disabled. These recommended permanent relocation amounts are designed to help ease disruptions caused by being forced to move to the condo conversion. The committee recommends that the base relocation amounts in the condo ordinance be updated to reflect these increased costs. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ellen Schachter.
Thank you very much, Morena. Hi, my name is Ellen Schachter, and I'm the Director of the Office of Housing Stability and also a member of the Residential Committee of the Anti-Displacement Task Force. The committee is recommending that, if feasible, Somerville should deepen affordability in its affordable housing program. Somerville's inclusionary housing program requires developers of multifamily housing to include affordable units in new buildings is one of the city's most powerful tools for creating new affordable housing. Somerville has one of the strongest inclusionary laws in the state. However, at present, inclusionary units are targeted to households between 50% and 100% of area median income. This means that to afford an affordable unit in inclusionary housing, a household of 4 would need to have a minimum income of approximately $81,000. The committee recommends, if possible, that we reach even lower income households with this program. The committee is recommending 2 things in relation to depth of affordability. First, that we continue to explore whether it would be financially feasible to target some of these units to extremely low-income households at or below 30% of area median income. Excuse me. And could we do this without discouraging or preventing the very housing production that is so necessary for the growth of affordable housing and housing in the city? Second, we should evaluate whether to continue to target some of these inclusionary units, as we currently do, to middle-income households at 110% of area median income. Rents in these units at 110% of area median income are often very similar to and sometimes higher than rents available on the open market. The demand for these units has been relatively low. So to help us answer these questions, the Housing Division engaged the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to research other inclusionary programs from around the country to see if other cities in different states have been able to serve households at 30% of area median income, through their inclusionary programs, and if so, how they were able to achieve that. In addition, the city is in the process of updating its housing needs assessment, and this will include a financial feasibility analysis to see whether it would be possible to implement any of these strategies for achieving greater depth of affordability here in Somerville without curtailing badly needed housing development. We anticipate that this report will be completed this spring. Next, the committee recommends the expansion of local fair housing enforcement and the monitoring of the sufficiency of new resources. At present, fair housing laws are enforced in one of 2 ways. First, a resident can file a complaint with the Somerville Fair Housing Committee. If it's determined that there is a legitimate fair housing issue, city staff can assist the resident with filing a complaint with the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, or MCAD. In the alternative, a resident can file a complaint directly with MCAD. Research has shown that housing discrimination, and in particular, refusal to rent to households with Section 8 or other housing subsidies, is widespread, and that fair housing laws are not well enforced throughout the Commonwealth. To get a greater sense of whether additional fair housing enforcement resources are needed in Somerville, the committee administered a survey, which was distributed to a wide range of stakeholders working in housing. Results from that survey show that when discrimination occurs, tenants and their advocates are often reluctant to file discrimination complaints, in part because they need to focus on their housing search, and second, because they do not think that filing a complaint will result in the tenant being able to move into the unit in question. At present, it takes MCAD about 2 years to resolve a housing complaint. This means that even if a tenant wins their case, by the time the case is concluded, the tenant generally has found other housing or the unit has been rented to another tenant and is no longer available. While conducting this research, the committee was able to identify new resources for local fair housing enforcement, which is very exciting and meaningful. First, the Office of Housing Stability has a contract with De Novo Center for Justice and Healing to represent tenants in eviction cases. De Novo has now agreed to include in its available services the filing of meritorious fair housing complaints. Second, Suffolk Law School's Housing Discrimination Clinic has confirmed that in appropriate cases, it will file discrimination cases in court rather than at MCAD and seek injunctive relief to freeze an apartment until a tenant's case is heard. This way, if successful, a tenant might actually be able to move into the intended unit. Third, the state legislature has passed legislation in December of 2024 that will, for the first time, set up a fair housing office within the state to assist with better education and enforcement of fair housing laws. Given the newly identified resources for enforcement and the low numbers of housing complaints currently being filed, the committee is recommending monitoring whether there appears to be unmet demand for enforcement services, and if it does appear so, considering the expansion of the powers of the Fair Housing Commission and the addition of staffing resources to adjudicate fair housing claims locally as opposed to at the state level. Next, the committee recommends that the city provide resources for community-owned land or housing. In 2015, the Sustainable Neighborhoods Working Group recommended that the city assist in the development of a community land trust. A community land trust is a community-run nonprofit that purchases and holds land to be used for affordable housing, community gardens, or other similar uses that benefit the community. With support from the city and the incredibly hard work of many Somerville residents, the Somerville Community Land Trust, or CLT, was born. It acquired its first property in 2022 and now is about to close on its third property. At present, the CLT is vital but small, run by 2 staff and many volunteers. To maximize the potential for the CLT to be able to compete effectively with private developers in the acquisition of properties, it needs additional support. The committee is recommending that the city provide additional monetary, technical, and physical space resources to the Somerville Community Land Trust or other organizations seeking to create community-owned and operated land. Next, the committee recommends the drafting and passage of a notice of building sale ordinance. Building sales are a significant contributing factor to displacement in Somerville. Often landlords seek to empty buildings to facilitate a sale, or new owners raise rents dramatically. As you have heard, the best way to keep low and moderate income tenants in place when a building is sold is to arrange for sale to a nonprofit. Affordable housing development is very complicated and often requires obtaining layers of funding from local, state, and federal government. To enable this to happen effectively, tenants need to know about building sales as soon as possible. While generally municipalities, as you have also heard, cannot pass laws that impact on landlord-tenant relationships without approval by the state legislature, after consultation with the law department, it appears that we should be able to adopt a law in Somerville which would require owners to notify tenants that their buildings are being sold at the same time that the buildings are first listed on the market. Hopefully, with the help of the city and nonprofits, this would enable tenants and their advocates to move more quickly to evaluate whether nonprofit purchase is possible. And last, we are recommending that there be prioritization of affordable housing in the disposition of city-owned property. The city owns some property which is not needed for the delivery of city services. Surplus city-owned property has been used over time for a variety of purposes, including the development of affordable housing. The committee recommends that a priority for use as affordable housing should be built into the formal process for the disposition of surplus property. And with that, I will turn this over to Ted Fields from the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee. Ted, I think you're muted still. Sorry.
Thank you. So hello, I'm Ted Fields. I'm from the city's Economic Development Division, and tonight I'm joined by my colleagues, Adriana Fernandez and Kelly O'Loughlin. And together, the three of us helped the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee with their work over the past 18 months. I really want to thank the members of that committee, as well as Adriana and Kelly, for their commitment and hard work over this time. It's been truly inspiring and gratifying to work on this project with them. Thank you. The committee really focused their recommendations based on their direct experience, including times when they were displaced, their businesses were displaced by factors outside of their control, including economic factors like rising rents or tenancies and leases not being renewed. These experiences led the committee to really focus on action-oriented solutions that could be implemented fairly quickly to help businesses and organizations that were undergoing displacement or threatened with imminent displacement in the city. And they really focused on a three-part plan to help small enterprises that needed immediate help in the short term, to assist small enterprises be more resilient to displacement in the midterm, and to increase the amount of affordable commercial space, especially for small businesses and enterprises over the long run. And that includes policies and techniques that can possibly prevent commercial displacement before it happens. So the committee's recommendations fall into the three areas that were described before: the sustain efforts, the adjust efforts, and the innovation efforts. Before I describe these recommendations, I just want to say that the committee also used groundbreaking research commissioned from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government as the technical basis for many of these recommendations and proposals, especially the longer term, more ambitious ones. So just to quickly go through these, in the site finding assistance and the emergency swing space programs, these are existing initiatives that the Economic Development Division undertakes. Site finding provides information on commercial vacancies to businesses that seek to locate in Somerville, and we've also dedicated it to helping businesses that are seeking to relocate in Somerville, either because of displacement or due to expansion, or they have to occupy smaller spaces. The emergency swing space referral program helps match businesses and entrepreneurs and small enterprises that need short-term space. And we've traditionally we looked at pop-out spaces in this program, but we are also using it for businesses that have been displaced and need a temporary place to get their bearings after they've been forced to vacate their primary business location to continue earning revenue before they move to a new permanent location. In the adjust bucket, we have amendment of the vacant storefront ordinance. The committee really recommends that Somerville's current vacant storefront ordinance have stronger penalties for property owners that keep leasable commercial space vacant, and to increase the incentives for property owners with vacant space to get that leased to commercial tenants as soon as possible. And the committee would also strongly recommend that the city look at its zoning ordinance and see how it can incentivize the provision of affordable commercial space in new commercial developments through density bonuses for affordable storefronts, affordable ground floor space, or affordable office or flex space. And then finally, the innovation recommendations include a commercial tenant or commercial leasing guidebook that we are currently putting the finishing touches on with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. The recently completed business technical assistance pilot, which used federal ARPA dollars to pioneer new technical assistance programs and funding assistance to businesses that needed help. And we're hoping to use the lessons from that pilot program to develop in the long term a commercial tenants assistance program that uses a variety of funding to provide technical assistance and also ideally financial assistance to businesses in the city. We're also exploring promulgating a commercial tenant bill of rights, similar to what was recently enacted in California, that includes expanded notification provisions for commercial tenants that are facing displacement or termination of their leases. And then ultimately, the committee recommends that an affordable commercial realty corporation be created. Ideally, it would be similar to a nonprofit commercial land trust that could operate affordable commercial space for small enterprises in the city that might be created from density bonuses or inclusionary commercial zoning. Next slide, please. And very quickly, these are the same recommendations, but just put into different buckets: the short-term bucket, the middle-term bucket, and the long-term bucket. As you can see, almost all of the committee's recommendations are in the short-term or the mid-term timeframes. That means for short-term, they should be able to, they're already underway or they should be implemented within about a year. Mid-term recommendations should be implementable in about 3 years. And then longer-term recommendations will take more work and should be ready in 5+ years if all goes according to plan. So with that, it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Michael.
Thank you, Ted. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Rosenberg. I had the privilege of serving as the staff co-chair for the Creative Displacement Committee, and I'm also an arts and cultural planner within the Somerville Arts Council. It's truly an honor to be here with you today to discuss an issue both urgent and important to me. It's the displacement of artists and creative spaces. The Creative Displacement Committee has been working diligently over the past year and a half, and I am proud to present you 21 recommendations aimed at combating displacement and to support our vibrant creative community. But before I dive into those recommendations, I do want to take a moment to recognize the incredible work of the committee. Their dedication and passion to this project has been unwavering and even going beyond the initial 1-year scope of this project. I also want to thank our community co-chair, Jen Harrington, whose tireless efforts have been vital to this process. She went above and beyond, playing a critical role in assisting the task force in this task force process and leading the way in developing this report, and it's greatly appreciated. So as many of you know, Somerville is facing a unique set of challenges. Its rise in property values is putting pressure on our community, and we're seeing its effects of displacement that have already swept across the greater Boston area. Creative spaces, which are the heart of our arts and cultural scene, are being lost at an alarming rate regionally. It's a pattern we've seen over the last few decades, but particularly in the years following the pandemic. Somerville has been recovering, but at the same time, we've seen increased pressure on our creative spaces. Many of you here today might be aware of some recent close calls with the loss of some artist spaces in Somerville and urgent advocacy efforts that have rallied the community together around these spaces. It's essential for us to recognize that now is the time to act before we lose any more of what makes Somerville such a special place. Our city has a real opportunity to prevent the kind of displacement that we've witnessed in other parts of the greater Boston area. This is our time to be proactive and not reactive. And with that, the Creative Displacement Committee has spent countless hours crafting solutions to address this challenge, proposing a series of recommendations that we believe will make a tangible difference. 21 recommendations is a lot. As you can see on the slide, it's a little tiny font. I apologize. But let me assure you, they're all designed with intentionality. We've taken a comprehensive look at challenges facing our creative community and crafted these recommendations to address them from multiple angles, while also making sure they are realistic and achievable. It's not just about one solution, it's about creating a holistic approach that tackles the root causes of displacement and offering long-term protections to our artists and creative community. On this slide, you see the 21 recommendations as it relates to the sustain, adjust, and innovate efforts, as seen previously throughout this presentation. Fitting them onto this one page is a little difficult. Again, sorry for the small font. You'll see them more in a few slides. The majority, and as you see, like, and it mentioned earlier, the majority of these in the creative community's recommendations fall in the innovate category. We really need to like work on building up the infrastructure that supports our creative community. We do a great job already with what we have, but like it's something that we really need to like help support and throw more money, throw more policy, and not let it fall off to the side. But yeah, take this all in as it is. We organized, Luis, if you can go to the next slide. We have organized the report into 6 overarching policy initiatives. So this is how I'm going to present it to you today and talk about each of these buckets instead of going over each individual recommendation, since 21 is a lot to cover. So these initiatives are a better way of introducing our recommendations. I will go over each one of the policy initiatives on a slide, and you can read the shortened version of the recommendation on the slide. We believe that focusing on these key areas can create a lasting change and benefit artists, creators, and the community at large. Our first initiative, if you can go to the next slide, please, is integrating arts and culture into city processes. And this has 2 recommendations. So by this, we're meaning that we want to embed the value of arts and culture into our city's decision-making process, from zoning to budgeting, to ensure that we're consistently prioritizing the creative sector and not leaving it behind. It's about making sure that artists and creatives aren't an afterthought, are at the forefront of our city's mind and decision-making processes. And that is through a city of statement of value of arts and integrating more into our policy and planning initiatives. Again, these are all brief overview. The full report will have much more detail, but I want to just give you a sense of where we're going with all of these recommendations. Our second initiative is assessing and monitoring Somerville's arts ecosystem. So the purpose of this is that we need to have a better understanding of the creative landscape of Somerville. Where are our arts and creative spaces? How are they being used? Where do the gaps exist in the current ecosystem? By tracking these factors, we're able to make more informed decisions that will help protect existing spaces and foster new ones. So this is done through creating an inventory of all of our creative spaces, maybe coming up with an artist census to understand who is in our creative community. Our third initiative on the next slide is all about cultivating and preserving creative space. This has 4 recommendations, and it is the most direct way to combat displacement. We wanted to develop strategies to both create new artist spaces and preserve existing ones, whether through new developments that include affordable artist spaces, assisting artists in purchasing their buildings, or any other creative solutions that come along. We just need to ensure that the city continues to be a place where artists can live, work, and create without fear of being displaced. The fourth initiative focuses on supporting arts and culture through zoning and other city ordinances. Zoning and city ordinances can help support or hinder the growth of creative spaces. And we wanted to ensure that our policies are actively fostering arts and culture and not unintentionally driving them out. This could mean creating specific zones for arts districts, ensuring new developments can't displace existing artist spaces, or updating existing regulations to support the growth of our creative economy. The fifth initiative is enhancing arts and business development. This initiative is about creating strong partnerships between the creative sector and the local economy. How do we support artists not only as creators, but as entrepreneurs? By helping them access resources like business development support, we can help them thrive and create a sustainable living while also contributing to the local economy. And then the last initiative is identifying and establishing arts and creative funding sources. One of the biggest barriers to sustaining creative spaces is financial support. We're advocating for a more robust system of funding, whether it's through grants, private sector investment, or partnerships with philanthropic organizations. We need to ensure artists have access to financial resources that they need to succeed and make sure the funding sources for all of these recommendations are stable and not relying on city budget that is not always the most stable. These policy initiatives and recommendations cover a wide range of areas. They are all interconnected and designed to address challenges that our creative community is facing from multiple angles. I do encourage you all to read the full report. It goes into so much detail, a lot of case studies, a lot of research background. It is a lot of pages, but it is worth the read. And I also want to say thank you again to the creative committee and all of their hard work. Thank you. Tried to keep that brief. It's a lot of information. And then back to Luis.
Thanks, Michael. So that concludes our recommendations. We're going to transition now over to our Q&A portion of this meeting. So we have a couple of questions lined up, and it looks like the first one is geared towards the Residential Displacement Committee. So Morena and Alan, I'll toss this over to you. We have a question: is it possible to access a list of recent properties which were sold for nonprofit developers and tenant-owned properties?
If I'll try to answer this question. If this is in relation to the Early Action Acquisition Fund, I don't have both the properties off the top of my head, but that is something that we can I can gather and then send it to the person who asked the question. I also know that the Somerville Community Land Trust has another property that they purchased, not with Early Action Acquisition Fund sources. So this is info that we can gather, but I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay. And the next question, same individual. There are many storefronts, for example, corner of Elm and Cedar, that have been empty for years and may be the result of zoning issues when these properties were developed. Just curious if there's a way to work with the owners of these empty storefronts to connect with small business owners and encouraging occupancy from small businesses and or creatives. This was for the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee.
Thanks, Louise, and thanks for the question. It's an excellent one. We are in fact using or working with some of the landowners referenced in the question to host some temporary businesses. And we've also shown some of those storefronts to businesses that are looking to either expand or to locate in Somerville or relocate within Somerville to some of those spaces along Elm Street and Davis Plaza, where Asana has purchased a large group of buildings for their new development. So actually we're using those are being used for the emergency swing space and in the site finder programs that I mentioned before. So yes, we are working with those landlords. And again, thanks for the question.
Thank you. And the last question I have, I believe this was in reference, I'm just going to move the slides back to reference the slide. I believe that it was the second slide. This question came in regard to this slide. Oh, I lost the question. One sec. Oh, how can the Somerville Arts Council support this effort? And I believe they were talking about the creative space inventory or artist census, but maybe it's a better question to answer overall. What role the Somerville Arts Council has in the implementation of the Creative Displacement Committee's recommendations?
Yeah, so my role is actually housed within the Arts Council. My position was created out of the Art Space Risk Assessment, which analyzed like development pressure on a lot of our artist studio buildings and identified that the need for staff support to like really focus on this as an issue. So a lot of these programs either are started within the Arts Council or the Arts Council is already set up to really support. So the Arts Council would be fully embedded in all of this.
We have one more. Okay, Scott Isfan asks, in looking at businesses, was there any feedback regarding difficulties or barriers in permitting and inspection when inspections when starting up or moving locations? I've heard anecdotal stories, but curious if there have been any detailed analysis.
And I can help answer this.
Sure.
Yeah, we actually, there has been feedback that permitting has been, a process that has been difficult in Somerville. So we do have, we created a new position that is the small business permitting liaison. Her name is Patricia Tenorio, and she's excellent. She hosts weekly office hours, and she really has become this connection between ISD, city clerk's office, and many different departments. Anecdotally, of course, every business permitting, inspections, licensing process is different. It's very unique. So it's very hard sometimes to have a uniform process. And I think that definitely can lead to frustrations as things pop up. For example, if you're renovating your building, and the building is not up to code, then you have to get the building up to code. And there's different types of renovations for if you're going to be implementing a kitchen versus if you're just doing a retail space, it might not trigger certain action items when you're going through that process of leasing out a space. So, there are difficulties. I think obviously each process is unique to the businesses that are going through them, but that is a recognized thing. And we do have staff members that are here to assist. So if anyone on this call is a small business that is needing assistance throughout the permitting process, we have options, and we would love to get connected with you to help you out through that process.
Thank you, Kelly. Next question. Looks like this is from the chair of the Human Rights Commission, I'm assuming for the city of Somerville. For small enterprise, noting human rights for tenants, solar to creative, statement of values. Maybe this looks like it's a two-part question. So for the first part, it looks like for small enterprise, human rights for tenants, solar to. I'm sorry, if you can resubmit that question, it seems a little I'm unable to determine what the question specifically is, but it looks like for small enterprise, one of the main questions here is what obstacles are in your way to completing some of your midterm goals within 3 years. Yeah, I think that's what the question is.
Sure. Primarily for the midterm goals, it can be, there's a number of factors. Some of them we have to design the programs and get them approved, or we might have to identify and secure funding. Some of these programs are new and will require substantial staff time to work through and iron out kinks and to adjust before we can implement them in the field. So those are the primary ones. And when we're doing this, we rely a lot on Adriana, Kelly, and our entire economic development staff to talk to local businesses as we're designing these programs to get their feedback, and that takes a little bit of time as well. Adriana or Kelly, do you have anything to add? And I'm happy to answer the rest of the question if it becomes clearer.
Okay. Next question. This one looks like it's for everyone, to the extent that y'all can answer this. In all areas, we should do our best to communicate well with people whose native language isn't English. There is a concern about such residents who may be displaced. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what our involvement has been with individuals who native language is not English. We can
Luis, if I could,
yeah,
if I could start that, I'd love to. Thank you. First of all, thanks to Meredith for raising this issue, which is so critical. And I wanted to turn to a little data just to show how important this is. A full 61% of the households that we have assisted with rental assistance that have needed it in order to prevent displacement speak a language other than English. This is a hugely disproportionate percentage of our population. I believe that folks that speak another language other than English as their first language was somewhere around the 15 to 20% in Somerville. So triple the amount that there should be if there was more equity in things that lead to need for rental assistance. So wanted to say a few things. First of all, our offices, most of our staff are bilingual, many are bicultural. We have really great support from the Somerville Office of Immigrant Affairs. And we, in everything we do with all materials, do our best to have everything translated and to have it in accessible format and plain language format. So thank you for raising this. It's obviously critical. And I did just want to say that that is why we designed our program specifically like the Mass Rental Voucher Program to really address the needs of our immigrant population who are disqualified and unable to really utilize some of the other mainstream resources. So thank you for raising this, and just wanted to give that as a response.
For the Small Enterprise Displacement Committee, many of our members speak languages besides English. And Adriana, our colleague, did a truly tremendous job in making sure that they were able to attend, that they were notified, and that we spent quite a bit of time obtaining input and communication with folks who are business owners and may not speak English as their primary language and speak other languages too. And Adriana, do you want to kind of speak about your efforts, because they were truly remarkable?
Yeah, but I also would like to address the collaboration. We've been collaborating with Soya very closely in both main streets. They also have language capacity. So we all been working together, going where the business owners are, because sometimes they don't have time to participate, especially some people, they have like digital issues. So participating virtually. So we are working together to go where the business owners and workers are to listen directly from them. So I just like to add that this is an effort that everybody has been like working together to make sure we can speak different languages and listen directly from our business owners on those issues.
And similarly to the housing folks, our Economic Development Division has a number of people, a number of staff who speak multiple languages, different languages, and it really helps serving our constituents.
Yeah, and it's just not just about language, but cultural competency. So it's more than words.
Exactly.
I also want to point out something that we did with this project as well. There was a lot of very academic or heavy or technical information that we had to review as part of the work of the three committees, and in an effort to be able to reduce those barriers for individuals to participate and steer this project, we had those documents summarized. So we created plain language summary documents of the more technical packets of information, and then we translated those as needed to people who needed them, and we offer them for translation as well. So it's not only just about translating a very technical document, but rather taking that document, putting it in plain language, and then translating that so that it's actually accessible to people, and so that we're removing as many barriers as possible. So I'm really proud of the work that the three committees have done to really make sure that we're meeting people where they're at and ensuring that they have what they need to be able to equitably participate in the committee's work.
And Luis, could you just share a little bit about going forward into the spring, like that we are going to be developing more user-friendly materials than the full reports that are out there? I think that would be helpful for folks to know.
Yeah, so like I mentioned in the timeline, this is just the beginning of the process of the kickoff. The next stage in the spring of 2025, we're going to be doing a community event, but included with that event is where we're going to launch the rest of this report, and that's going to include a summary document, which is undergoing heavy graphic design work to be able to make sure that we're presenting a summary document, and an executive summary, if you will, of the three committees' work that is put in plain language, that is graphically intensive, like a document that is easily accessible in multiple different ways, rather than just relying on like the words on a page. We're looking to incorporate visual elements and other ways of being able to more intuitively grasp the concepts that we're trying to convey in the report, because they are complicated, they're complex, they're very, very nuanced, and that does not mean that it it does not mean that only a certain individual should be able to understand this information. We should try to make this accessible to everyone. So that is part of the work that we're doing with this report. So we have two versions of the report, one long form report and a more accessible document that we're looking to really take our time and design in a way that is accessible for all coming out in the spring. We have a couple more questions. I want to just also thank everyone for attending. If you have to drop off, of course, we're going to have these questions if we don't get to answer all of them on our SomerVoice page, and we'll make sure we answer them and post them there. So if you don't see your question answered here, please head over to our SomerVoice page to get those answers. And I'll have the last slide be placed here so people have an opportunity to do that. But I do want to recognize that we have Senator Katjana in our room and has asked a question. I'm going to allow Senator to maybe provide context to that question. The question was potential zoning changes and how they could slow displacement for all three sectors. So if you wanted to elaborate on that question, Senator, feel free to. Otherwise, we can try to take that question.
Well, mostly it is a tremendous gratitude to you all because you have taken on such important work. And if I could make it all happen right now, it would make the world a better place. So just that. I'm thinking a lot about zoning, and I have been more aware of it about the arts in my neighborhood, but I wonder if there are other things that we can do through our zoning that would support the work you all are doing. That's just, I don't know if you've considered that, but you have so many good ideas, and I'm just so excited and to be able to anything that, well, you know that I would like to work on all the things you're talking about, especially housing. That's what I know about. But thank you all.
Thank you. Louise, do you want me to start?
Sure.
Thank you, Senator. In the Small Enterprise Committee, we really used the Harvard study that I referenced to look at how we can use what are called density bonuses in commercial developments to incentivize developers to make their ground floor spaces affordable to small local businesses, especially storefront type businesses. And in practical terms, what we are looking at is allowing developers to add a floor to the tops of their buildings if they agree to make their ground floor or spaces on the ground floor and the second floor affordable to neighborhood businesses. And there's a lot of details to work out there, but our financial studies with Harvard show that that's a revenue neutral or revenue positive approach for developers, depending on what types of commercial properties they build. And that could really be a helpful policy to help not just address commercial displacement, but even to stave it off from happening in the first place.
If I could, I just wanted to note to the senator, first of all, we've talked a lot here about local strategies. A lot of the work that we do on anti-displacement happens at the state level, at the State House, and has to. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Senator Jalen for being in the lead on so many of the issues that are most important to us. So thank you for being there tonight. Thank you for being at the State House and for always collaborating with us on all the issues that matter around anti-displacement.
I think that Michael, do you want to add anything on the zoning element of the Creative Displacement Committee? I think there might have been something there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, Senator Jalen mentioned the art stuff happening in Somerville, but yeah, some of the zoning changes that we can do is really tightening up our land use definitions on how we define creative space, making sure that we are allocating space specifically to that. We are also working on a few other things about like a payment in lieu for some of our requirements, so that way we can use some funding to actually support other spaces and not getting expensive art spaces in our new development. And then also along the lines with the small enterprise committee of like creating spaces that are actually affordable and people can rent at a reasonable rate.
Right. All right, thank you all. And we have a couple other questions. I'm going to take one more. This one's a quick one. On the residential side, we should provide for accessible units in our policies. Is there anything that the Residential Displacement Committee or any other committee can talk about with regard to consideration for accessibility in the units created?
Thanks. Go ahead, Miranda, you go
Yeah,
first.
I was just going to note that the inclusionary zoning ordinance, when units are being set aside for inclusionary for affordability reasons, the inclusionary zoning team will actually, there'll be some that are required to be accessible. So they'll actually choose some of those out. I don't know what the rate is of how often an accessible unit has to be provided, but that is already part of the policies in the inclusionary zoning ordinance.
And I would just add a note that most affordable housing developments happen with an array of funding, as we talked about, from the state, federal, and local sources. And in much of those funding sources require the development of a specific percentage of handicapped accessible housing to be included in order to get the funding to do affordable housing projects. But again, thank you for raising this. So important and so necessary, especially as our population ages in the city of Somerville.
All right, I think that'll wrap us up. I know we're a little over. Thank you everyone for hanging in there. We have 2 more questions that didn't make it to get answered. We're going to take these questions from Christopher, and we're going to answer those and post it on our SomerVoice page. So use the QR code here to get shot right over to that page. Use the link on the screen, or you can email us with the email on the screen there as well. You can also email our staff as well here as their information. We are happy that you guys are able to come out. We are very excited for what's coming next. And yeah, you'll be able to see more in the spring, and hopefully y'all can come out too to celebrate the community that was a part of this effort, and watch the screening of the short story, or the short film, Displacement Stories. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you to all the presenters, and thank you for your really insightful questions. I'm going to go ahead and close this out.
And thank you to Luis for being our fearless leader.
Yeah.
Yes. And to all our committee members out there
Yes.
too. Michael remembered to start with that. So just a big heartfelt thank you to everybody out there.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.